She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't dominate you physically. She doesn't declare war. But somehow, she wins. She gets the validation. She shapes the narrative. She rewrites the terms of the relationship without lifting a finger. Woman has always conspired with the types of decadence, with the weak, with the failures, against the strong. Friedrich Nietzsche. You won't hear this in school. You won't see it in the media. You won't read it in modern romance books. Because Nietzsche's warning wasn't romantic. It wasn't polite. It wasn't comforting. It was true. And that truth is this. Female power is not loud. It's quiet, not direct, but atmospheric. Not masculine, but devastating. Most men still deny it. Why? Because to accept it means admitting that everything you thought was strength was actually submission in disguise. In this video, we will strip away the social lies. We will trace Nietzsche's most controversial insight through history, myth, biology, and psychology. And by the end, you will finally understand why the feminine doesn't fight the masculine, it subdues it. Nietzsche the Exposer, why he wasn't a misogynist. Before we go further, we must destroy the first illusion, that Nietzsche hated women. He didn't. He hated lies. He hated illusions. He hated the moral masks men wore to cover their cowardice. And he hated how modern man had turned woman into an object of worship, only to blame her when she rejected the pedestal. Everything in woman is a riddle, he wrote, and everything in woman has one solution. It is called pregnancy. To the average reader, this sounds like insult, but to Nietzsche, it was reality stripped of decoration. His philosophy was rooted in the idea of the will to power, the instinct to overcome, dominate, and shape life. And he saw clearly. Both sexes play the game of power, but they play it differently. The masculine tends to express power through force, conquest, clarity. The feminine tends to express power through selection, suggestion, and strategy. Nietzsche's critiques were aimed not at woman, but at man's delusion about her. The man who sees woman as a goddess, a redeemer, a pure vessel of virtue, is the same man who gets crushed by her tests, confused by her shifts, and broken by his own expectations. Nietzsche was not red pill. He was not a reactionary. He was a prophet of psychological realism, and his rejection of modern morality was tied to his rejection of the way men softened themselves to win affection, while calling that submission love. He didn't blame women for using their nature. He blamed men for not understanding it. Hidden power. The feminine is subversive sovereignty. She doesn't push. She pulls. She doesn't demand. She implies. She doesn't conquer by command. She conquers by being irresistible. This is the essence of feminine power, as Nietzsche saw it. Not as confrontation, but as influence, stealthy, symbolic, sovereign. Here's what most men miss. Female power rarely shows up in direct conflict. It shows up in emotional leverage, in unspoken expectations, in silent tests, and the man who doesn't see it will mistake her softness for submission, when in truth, it is strategy. Nietzsche wrote that woman is closer to nature than man, not in a primitive sense, but in her deep instinct to adapt, survive, and win. She knows, consciously or not, how to influence without appearing to. She redirects conversations. She signals through tone. She tests through silence. In a world of strength and force, her power is atmospheric. Subtle, but absolute. And most modern men, raised without masculine clarity, fall into her orbit without realizing it. They make decisions not based on vision, but based on her moods. They avoid confrontation to preserve her affection. They trade standards for peace, and in doing so, they become ruled, not through command, but through emotional governance. Nietzsche believed women's will to power was often more dangerous than men's, because it was invisible. Historical echoes prove this. Agrippina, mother of Nero, ruled Rome from the shadows, orchestrating power plays behind the imperial throne. Salome in biblical lore didn't speak judgment, she danced it into being, and John the Baptist lost his head. Empress Theodora of Byzantium, once an actress and courtesan, manipulated political alliances with cunning unmatched by generals. These women didn't need to shout. They didn't need to fight. They reigned without raising a sword. And that's what Nietzsche respected, feared, and warned against. The woman who seems soft, maybe testing your structure. The woman who seems devoted, maybe watching for weakness. Not out of cruelty, but because that's what power does. It tests. And the man who sees only her words misses her strategy. Selection as supremacy. How women shape evolution. Power isn't always in the throne. Sometimes it's in the gate. Men compete, but women choose. And Nietzsche understood something Darwin hinted at, but never fully explored. The one who selects the victor is more powerful than the victor himself. This is female supremacy through sexual selection, a force older than empires and far more enduring. Charles Darwin proposed it in his theory of natural selection. Survival isn't just about strength. It's about being chosen to reproduce. And in most species, including humans, the woman chooses. Schopenhauer even said, "The final decision over the existence of the next generation rests with the female." But Nietzsche took it further. He saw this not just as biology, but as psychological warfare. Because when men don't understand this power, they spend their lives performing. They shape their bodies to be seen. They earn to impress. They talk to win approval. Not from God. Not from self. From her. Not because she demanded it, but because he internalized the need to be selected. This is the most invisible form of control. The man who has everything, but is still ruled by the fear of being unwanted. And so he becomes tame, predictable, needy. Not because woman forced him to be, but because he forgot who he was when no one was watching. Nietzsche's point wasn't that women are evil, it's that men are blind. They mistake attraction for approval. They mistake validation for partnership. They mistake being desired for being respected. But selection is not love, it's strategy. And a woman may select you, not because you're strong, but because you're controllable, because you don't threaten her frame, because you've already yielded without knowing it. Look at the cultural data. Most dating apps favor the top 10% of men. Most men swipe endlessly, wait passively, hope desperately. This isn't dating. This is digital selection warfare. And what happens to the men who aren't chosen? They either collapse into resentment, retreat into delusion, or awaken into sovereignty. Because the only man who survives this age of invisible power is the one who no longer asks to be chosen. He chooses himself. He defines his own values. He holds frame in the presence of rejection, beauty, and seduction. Nietzsche would say, the noble soul has reverence for itself. The collapse of the strong. Why idealizing women destroys men. He was the leader, the warrior, the visionary, until she entered. Not with threats, not with demands, but with the promise of completion. And slowly, without resistance, he bent, not to her authority, but to his own illusion of her perfection. This is the collapse of the strong, and Nietzsche saw it everywhere. Man's greatest weaknesses are not his sins, but his ideals. Friedrich Nietzsche. And the most dangerous ideal of all, the woman as redeemer. Chivalry made her holy. Romanticism made her divine. Christianity made her pure. And modern men, raised by single mothers, soft teachers, and romantic media, internalized the lie. If I am good enough, she will save me. But Nietzsche knew. This hope was a mask for willful blindness, because the man who idealizes the feminine loses the ability to see clearly. He ignores her tests. He justifies her chaos. He bends when he should lead. He praises when he should discern, not because she asked him to, but because he turned her into a goddess. And no man corrects a goddess, but goddesses don't exist. And when the woman eventually reveals her humanness, her flaws, her power plays, her instincts, he feels betrayed. But she didn't betray him. His illusion did. History is filled with this collapse. Samson, blinded by Delilah, not because of her seduction, but because of his delusion. Odysseus, lost on Circe's island, not because of her magic, but because he forgot his mission. Antony, undone by Cleopatra, not because of her ambition, but because he abandoned his own. These were not weak men. They were strong men who forgot their standards in the presence of beauty. And Nietzsche's critique wasn't that women are dangerous. It was that men forget who they are in their presence. Beware of marrying for love, Nietzsche quipped, lest you end up hating both marriage and love. To worship the woman is to abandon frame. To see her as perfection is to erase her humanity, and in doing so, erase your clarity. The collapse always follows idealization, because no human can live up to fantasy, and the stronger the man, the greater the fall, because he built more on the lie. But it doesn't have to be this way. If you stop expecting the woman to complete you, if you stop kneeling to beauty as if it grants virtue, if you stop asking her to be your moral compass, emotional anchor, and purpose all at once, you remain sovereign, you remain stable, you remain awake. Woman as instinct, what Nietzsche really meant. She doesn't plan the way you do. She doesn't rationalize the way you do. She doesn't overthink your words the way you overanalyze hers. She moves by instinct, and Nietzsche didn't hate this. He feared it. He respected it. He called it real. What inspires respect for woman, and often enough fear as well, is her nature, which is more natural than man's. Friedrich Nietzsche. To Nietzsche, woman was nature, not symbolic of it, identical with it. And what is nature? Unforgiving, strategic, mercilessly selective. Nature does not care about fairness. Nature selects the fittest. Not the most virtuous, not the most hopeful, but the one who does not collapse. This is how Nietzsche understood woman, not as moral, but as adaptive. Not as idealistic, but as effective. She responds to energy, not promises. She respects power, not poetry. She follows certainty, not sympathy. And this is why she confuses the modern man, because he is a creature of concepts, of rules, of shoulds. She should appreciate how kind I am. She should value how much I listen. She should respect me because I never raise my voice. But she's not moved by your morality. She's moved by your center, by your direction, by whether or not you stand apart from the millions of men seeking approval by abandoning themselves. Rousseau wrote about woman as the natural educator, a being whose instincts test the man to reveal if he's worthy of shaping. Jung later described woman as the anima, a projection of the man's inner feminine. But real women don't behave like fantasies. They behave like filters. And the woman, when stripped of romantic illusion, functions like a test of your evolution. Can you hold frame when she tests your strength? Can you stay still when she stirs the waters? Can you remain sovereign when she withholds affection? If not, you fail. Not because she's cruel, but because she is instinct, and instinct only follows certainty. This is what Nietzsche meant when he said, "The strength of a man is measured by the resistance he provokes in woman." Not in a combative sense, but in the sense that woman will press against your identity, not to destroy it, but to see if it holds. You are not in a war with her. You are in a war with your own softness. And if you lose that war, she will feel it. And her instincts will move on, emotionally, sexually, or spiritually. Beyond bitterness, why this truth isn't hatred. Once the mask is gone, it's tempting to burn the stage, to turn your awakening into ammunition, to say, she lied, she played me, she's the problem. But that's not awakening, that's resentment in disguise. And Nietzsche warned against this too. Distrust all in whom the impulse to punish is powerful, because the man who becomes bitter hasn't transcended illusion. He's just replaced idealization with inverted worship, still centered on her, still reacting, still ruled. This is not what truth is for. This is not what Nietzsche meant. Nietzsche's critique of women was never a crusade. It was a mirror held up to men, a mirror that asked, "Why do you kneel? Why do you hide your power? Why do you soften your standard for the sake of affection?" This truth isn't hatred, it's freedom. Freedom from expecting her to validate your worth, needing her to complete your story, blaming her when your frame collapses. Nietzsche never said, resent her. He said, see her clearly. Because the moment you see her as she is, not as society told you she should be, you stop making her responsible for your destiny. And ironically, that's when she can finally respect you. Not because you dominate, not because you control, but because you are no longer caught in the emotional whirlwind that weak men mistake for connection. The best weapon against woman Nietzsche wrote, is silence and firmness, not coldness, not cruelty, but frame. A man who does not collapse in the presence of the test. A man who does not moralize her instinct. A man who does not fear her nature because he's mastered his own. This is not about becoming hard. It's about becoming whole. You don't need to control her. You don't need to fix her. You don't even need her. You just need to stop lying to her, to yourself. When a man replaces fantasy with discernment, when he replaces performance with purpose, when he replaces collapse with clarity, he becomes sovereign. The new masculine frame. What to do with this power. You've swallowed the hard truth. You've watched the fantasy collapse, and you've refused to sink into bitterness. Now what? Now, you build your frame. Not as armor against women, not as a strategy to manipulate them, but as a foundation so solid that no woman, not even the most alluring, can move you off your center. Because power, real power, doesn't react. It doesn't negotiate with chaos. It doesn't explain itself to be approved. The noble man has reverence for himself. Friedrich Nietzsche. The new masculine frame begins with this. You are not here to be chosen. You are here to choose. And your choices must arise from standard, not scarcity. From values, not validation. That means you don't chase. You don't collapse to be loved. You don't bend your truth to keep her happy. You live by principle, you stand on truth, and you lead with vision. Because the man who has no direction will always be redirected by her moods. This is the shift. From seeking her attention to commanding respect. From proving your worth to embodying it. From reacting to her tests to rendering them irrelevant. You don't control her. You outgrow the need to. Because the man who holds frame understands her test is not the problem. His collapse is. This is where Nietzsche's insight transforms. It's no longer a warning. It's a call to evolve beyond romantic slavery, a call to rise into sovereign presence, a call to rule, not others, but yourself. What does that look like practically? You walk away from chaos, not out of fear, but out of clarity. You reward alignment, not manipulation. You pursue purpose like it's oxygen, and love becomes optional, not essential. You become the man who can walk alone, and that's exactly why people will want to follow you. He who cannot command himself must obey. Nietzsche. You command yourself, and by doing that, you escape the unconscious pull of emotional reward and romantic dependence. You were never meant to be chosen. You waited. You hoped. You tried to be good enough, kind enough, stable enough. You thought one day she'd see it. She'd choose you. She'd crown you with the love you thought you earned. But that day never came. Or worse, it came, and it broke you. Not because she changed, but because you built your identity around her approval. And that was the lie. You were never meant to be chosen, Nietzsche would say. You were meant to choose yourself. The tragedy of the modern man is not his weakness. It's his waiting. Waiting for a sign. Waiting for affection. waiting for confirmation that he's finally enough. But you were never supposed to wait. You were supposed to become a man who holds his standard, not because it guarantees love, but because it protects his soul. To become a man who doesn't react to every glance, every test, every silence, but responds with stillness and direction. She can love you. She can hate you. She can stay. She can leave, but she cannot move you. Because you have returned to yourself. You don't moralize her nature. You don't worship her beauty. You don't resent her instinct. You see her clearly, and you choose what aligns. You walk away from what doesn't. The man who understands Nietzsche's forbidden insight is not at war with women. He's at peace with himself. And from that peace, he rules, not by force, not by fame, but by frame. I am not what happens to me, said Jung, echoing the same call. I am what I choose to become. So let this be the end of the fantasy. Let this be the death of the performance. Let this be the beginning of the sovereign man. If this spoke to your soul, type in the comments, I choose myself. Because in the next chapter, we're going deeper. Jung's shocking. Warning about modern women. Subscribe, share, wake up.